We need medicine. He can't breathe. Little girl with sick baby sells candy. And a millionaire CEO. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin with today's story. On a chilly evening in the heart of the city, with the streets bustling with holiday shoppers and the glow of festive lights filling the air, Ryan Weston, a successful millionaire CEO, walked briskly down the sidewalk. The sharp click of his polished shoes echoed against the cold concrete as he tried to ignore the loneliness that had settled deep inside him. He had it all: the fortune, the office overlooking the skyline, the luxury car parked outside. But what good was all of it when he returned home to an empty house every night? As he walked past a small corner store, his attention was drawn to something unusual. A young girl, no older than 8 or 9, was sitting on the cold concrete, a worn-out cardboard box beside her. She had messy brown hair, her face pale and tired. Clutched tightly in her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a ragged blanket. It was a baby. The girl's eyes met Ryan's for a split second, and it was enough to make him stop in his tracks. There was something in her gaze, something so raw and desperate, that Ryan couldn't ignore. He hesitated for a moment, but then the baby coughed, a weak, raspy sound that sent a chill down his spine. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Please, sir, we need medicine. He can't breathe," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise of the street. Ryan felt his heart tighten in his chest. His mind raced, trying to process the situation. He had no idea who these children were or why they were out here, but the look of desperation in the girl's eyes was enough to shake him from his self-imposed emotional isolation. Without thinking, he knelt down, his knees scraping against the cold pavement. As he gently touched the baby's forehead, the small child was burning with fever. Ryan's mind raced. He had to do something. He couldn't just walk away. The girl, still clutching the baby, stared at him, her eyes filled with fear and hope. She was waiting for him to make a decision. In that moment, Ryan made a promise to himself. No one would ever be alone like this again if he could help it. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed for help, his voice trembling as he spoke to the dispatcher. "I need an ambulance. A child is in critical condition. Please hurry." As the sound of sirens grew closer, Ryan couldn't help but wonder what had led these two innocent souls to this place. How could a child end up in such a dire situation, alone on the streets with no one to turn to? The ambulance arrived soon after, and the paramedics quickly took the baby from the girl's arms, placing him gently onto the stretcher. Ryan stood there, watching as the little girl was ushered into the ambulance with her brother. He wasn't sure what to do next, but he knew one thing for certain. His life had just changed forever. The city around him seemed to fade away as he followed the ambulance, unsure of what awaited him, but determined to make things right. In that moment, Ryan realized that sometimes the smallest voices can make the biggest impact on our hearts. As the ambulance sped through the streets, Ryan couldn't shake the image of the little girl's face. Her eyes, wide with fear, haunted him as he followed the flashing lights. He didn't know why he felt such a deep connection to her or her baby brother. He had never been the kind of man who was moved by strangers, let alone children. But something about this situation was different. His mind raced with questions. Where was their mother? Why were they out on the streets in such a condition? The more he thought about it, the more he felt the urgency to do something, anything, to make sure this didn't happen to another child. When they arrived at the hospital, Ryan followed the ambulance into the emergency room, his heart pounding in his chest. The paramedics rushed the baby into the intensive care unit, while the little girl was taken to another area to be checked for any signs of injury. Ryan stood there, unsure of what to do, feeling more helpless than he had in years. He wanted to ask questions, to understand what had led these two children to this point, but he knew he couldn't just push for answers. He needed to be patient, to let things unfold. As the minutes passed, Ryan couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between this hospital and his own life. The sterile, fluorescent-lit hallways, the quiet murmur of medical staff, the steady beep of machines. It all felt so far removed from the world of luxury and success he was used to. But in that moment, it felt like this was the real world. This was where the true battles were fought and won. He turned to the nurse who had been tending to the girl. "Is she okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The nurse nodded, offering him a brief smile. "She's stable for now, but we need to get a full evaluation. The baby, he's critical." Ryan's chest tightened at the thought of the baby. He had seen the fragile little body, the way it struggled to breathe, and it broke his heart. He couldn't imagine what kind of life these children had lived to end up in such a situation. As he waited in the sterile room, Ryan thought back to his own childhood. He had never known what it was like to go without. His parents had always provided everything he needed. But he had also grown up with a sense of emotional isolation, a coldness that he had carried with him into adulthood. He realized, with a sudden clarity, that he had been blind to the struggles of others for far too long. He had been so focused on his own success, his own accomplishments, that he had neglected to see the world around him. The world where children like the little girl and her brother were struggling to survive. When the doctor finally arrived, he explained the situation with the baby. "He has severe respiratory distress. We're doing everything we can to stabilize him, but we need to know more about his medical history. Can you tell us anything about his condition?" Ryan looked at the girl, who was sitting quietly in the corner of the room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked so small, so lost. "What's your name?" he asked her gently. She hesitated before answering. "Sophia," she whispered. "Sophia, do you know what's wrong with your brother?" She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "He's always been sick," she said softly. "But we didn't have the money for medicine. Mom died last year, and my aunt doesn't care about us." Ryan felt his stomach drop. It was worse than he had imagined. These children had been abandoned, neglected, and left to fend for themselves. He knew he had to do something. As the doctor spoke with the nurse, Ryan stood up and walked over to Sophia, kneeling down in front of her. He took her small hands in his, looking into her eyes with a promise that he meant with all his heart. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm here for you. I'm going to help you, both of you. You'll never have to worry about being alone again." Sophia looked up at him, her tear-streaked face slowly breaking into a hesitant smile. For the first time in what seemed like forever, she felt a glimmer of hope. Ryan stood up and turned to the doctor, his resolve firm. "I'm taking care of this," he said. "I'll cover all the medical expenses, and I'll make sure these children are safe. They need a home, and I'm going to make sure they get one." The doctor nodded, and Ryan's heart swelled with determination. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to fight for these children. He had found a new purpose in life, one that didn't involve business meetings or boardrooms. It was about helping these kids, giving them a future they deserved. And that, he realized, was the most important thing he could ever do. As Ryan made the call to ensure the medical costs would be covered for Sophia and her brother, he felt a sense of calm, something he hadn't experienced in years. He had promised them a future, and he was going to keep that promise. The thought of what they had gone through filled him with a deep sense of regret. How had he never noticed the children struggling right in front of him? As he sat by the hospital bed that night, Sophia holding her brother's hand, Ryan couldn't help but reflect on his own life. He had been consumed by ambition, a relentless drive to succeed. Yet here he was, sitting in a cold, sterile hospital room, witnessing the resilience of two children who had been abandoned and left to survive on their own. He had everything money could buy, but they had something he had lost: love, hope, and a family bond. The next few days were a whirlwind. Ryan worked closely with the hospital staff, ensuring that Sophia and her brother received the best care possible. It wasn't just about money anymore. He was emotionally invested in their future, wanting to protect them from any more pain. He couldn't imagine what their lives had been like before this moment. As he spent more time with Sophia, he learned about her life before her mother passed. Her mother had been a kind woman, but she had struggled with illness. Sophia and her brother had been neglected by their aunt, the woman who was supposed to take care of them. Ryan's heart broke hearing the details of the abuse they had suffered. The neglect, the fear, the constant feeling of being unwanted. He had been sheltered from this kind of reality for so long, his wealth and success creating a bubble around him that kept the harshness of life at bay. But now, the reality of these children's lives had shattered that illusion. One afternoon, After the baby had been moved to a regular room and was showing signs of improvement, Ryan sat with Sophia in the hospital's cafeteria. The cafeteria was busy, but for Ryan, it felt as though time had slowed down. He looked across the table at the little girl, who was now drawing on a napkin with crayons. The small act of normalcy made him smile. It was so simple, yet it meant so much. As she finished her drawing, she handed it to him. "It's for you, Mr. Weston," she said shyly. Ryan looked at the drawing. It was a picture of him, holding her hand and her brother's hand, with a heart above them. It was childish, yes, but it was also full of hope. It was a symbol of something he had never thought he could find: family. "Thank you, Sophia," Ryan said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You know, you're stronger than you think." Sophia looked up at him, her big brown eyes meeting his. "You're stronger, Mr. Weston. You helped us." Ryan's heart swelled. She was right. He had helped them, but in doing so, they had helped him too. They had opened his eyes to a world beyond his own, a world where kindness and compassion were the true markers of success. Over the next few weeks, Ryan made it his mission to ensure that Sophia and her brother would never have to worry about their future. He hired legal help to fight for their custody, making sure that their aunt could never hurt them again. He also made arrangements for their education, enrolling them in a nearby school where they could have a fresh start. The process was slow, but with each passing day, Sophia and her brother seemed to grow stronger. They began to trust him more, and Ryan's heart warmed with each small step forward. He wasn't just saving them, they were saving him too. They had given him a purpose beyond his business empire. As Ryan sat in his office late one evening, looking out over the city skyline, he realized something profound. He had been so focused on building his empire, on accumulating wealth, that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. The connection with others, the ability to make a difference in someone's life. That was the real wealth. He turned to look at the picture Sophia had drawn for him, and for the first time in years, he smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile that came from success or achievement. It was the kind of smile that came from knowing he had done something meaningful. He had made a difference. And in doing so, he had found a new family. A family built on love, trust, and hope. And that was worth more than anything money could buy. As the weeks passed, Ryan became more and more involved in the lives of Sophia and her brother. He had promised them a future, and he was determined to keep that promise. The legal battle for their custody had been long and complicated, but Ryan never backed down. He hired the best attorneys, and together, they fought relentlessly to ensure that Sophia and her brother would never be put in harm's way again. Meanwhile, Sophia and her brother slowly started adjusting to their new life. They attended school and began making friends. The constant fear and uncertainty that had once clouded their lives began to fade. They had a safe place to live, food on the table, and most importantly, they had someone who cared for them. Sophia had started to trust Ryan more, and he could see the hope returning in her eyes. She was no longer the scared, defensive little girl he had met weeks earlier. She was starting to blossom. One afternoon, after school, Ryan picked up Sophia and her brother from their new foster home. They were excited to tell him about their day, about the friends they had made, and the activities they had enjoyed. Ryan couldn't help but smile. It was the first time in a long time that he felt truly happy. They went for ice cream, and for the first time since they had met, Sophia laughed. A real, genuine laugh. It was music to Ryan's ears. The bond between them had grown stronger, and Ryan was starting to see them as his own children. The thought of them being taken away, even temporarily, felt unbearable. As they sat in the ice cream parlor, enjoying their treat, Ryan looked at Sophia and her brother and made a silent promise to himself. No matter what, he would always be there for them. He would protect them from everything and everyone who had ever hurt them. That evening, after they returned home, Ryan sat down with his lawyer to discuss the next steps in the custody case. The progress they had made so far was promising, but there was still much to be done. They needed to make sure that Sophia and her brother would never have to return to the neglect and abuse they had suffered at the hands of their aunt. As the meeting wrapped up, Ryan looked out the window at the city lights, deep in thought. He couldn't help but think about his own past. He had grown up with wealth and privilege, but he had never known love. He had never had a family. His parents had always been distant, focused solely on their own success. Ryan had been raised by nannies and private tutors, but no one had ever really been there for him. He had always felt like something was missing, like he was incomplete. But now, as he looked at Sophia and her brother, he realized something important. They had found each other. They had found the family they so desperately needed. And in doing so, they had given Ryan the family he had always longed for. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and paperwork, but Ryan never wavered in his commitment to Sophia and her brother. The day finally came when the judge ruled in their favor. Sophia and her brother were officially placed under Ryan's care. It was a bittersweet victory. While he was overjoyed to have them in his life permanently, he couldn't help but think of the years they had lost. The years of neglect, the years of fear and uncertainty. But he knew that, from that moment on, their future was secure. Sophia and her brother were safe, and Ryan had become the father they had always needed. The journey had been long, but it was worth every step. As Ryan walked out of the courthouse with Sophia and her brother by his side, he knew that his life had been forever changed. He had found something more valuable than wealth or success. He had found family, and that, he realized, was the greatest gift he could ever give. As the months passed, life slowly started to return to normal for Sophia and her brother. They had finally settled into their new home, and Ryan couldn't help but feel proud of how far they had come. They were no longer the scared, abandoned children he had first met. They were thriving, finding joy in the small things, and building their own little world of safety and love. For Ryan, it was a transformation as well. The business world, once his only focus, no longer held the same allure. His priorities had shifted, and his heart now belonged to the two children who had come into his life by chance, but had changed it forever. One evening, as they sat together for dinner, Sophia looked up from her plate and spoke with a seriousness that made Ryan pause. "Mr. Weston," she said, "do you ever miss your family?" Ryan smiled softly, setting down his fork. He had never really thought about his family in the traditional sense. He had never had a family like the one Sophia and her brother had. His childhood had been filled with isolation, with success, but no emotional connection. "I used to think success was all that mattered," Ryan replied, his voice thoughtful. "But now, I realize that family, love, and being there for the people who need you, that's the real success." Sophia smiled, her eyes lighting up with a mix of innocence and understanding beyond her years. "I think you have a family now," she said quietly. Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. She was right. He had a family now, Sophia and her brother. They had healed him in ways he never expected. As the weeks continued to pass, Ryan worked hard to ensure their future. He made sure they had everything they needed, from a stable home to a good education. Sophia had dreams of becoming a teacher, and her brother, despite his earlier struggles, was showing signs of being a gifted artist. Ryan was determined to help them reach their potential, to give them the opportunities they deserved. He enrolled them in extracurricular activities, introduced them to the best tutors, and made sure they had a supportive environment to grow in. As time went on, Sophia and her brother blossomed. They found their place in the world, surrounded by people who cared for them. They were no longer the broken children he had first met, but instead, they were full of hope and promise. Ryan watched with pride as Sophia received an award at school for her academic achievements. Her hard work, determination, and the support she had received were paying off. Her brother, too, had found his passion for painting, and Ryan was amazed at the talent he showed for someone so young. One evening, as Ryan watched them both playing in the yard, laughing and joking with each other, he realized just how much they had given him. They had shown him what true happiness was. They had shown him the value of family, love, and the importance of being there for each other. Ryan had spent so many years focused on his career and his wealth, thinking that these were the things that defined him. But now, he knew that his true legacy would be the love and care he had given to Sophia and her brother. He was no longer the lonely man he once was. He had found his family, and with them, he had found his purpose. As he stood there, watching them run around the yard, he smiled to himself, feeling a sense of peace he had never known before. He had given them a future, but they had given him something even more valuable, a home, a family, and a love he had never thought possible. Ryan Weston was no longer defined by his wealth or his success. He was defined by the love he had for the two children who had changed his life forever. As the days went by, Ryan watched as Sophia and her brother continued to thrive. The scars of their past began to fade, though Ryan knew it would take years for them to fully heal. The trauma they had experienced would always be a part of them, but it no longer defined who they were. Ryan worked hard to ensure that their lives were filled with love, security, and the opportunities they had never known. He made sure they had the best tutors, enrolled them in activities that helped them grow, and ensured they felt safe and supported every day. One day, as they sat around the kitchen table, Sophia, now 12, looked up at Ryan with a serious expression on her face. "Mr. Weston," she said, her voice tentative, "do you think I can really be a teacher one day?" Ryan smiled warmly at her, his heart swelling with pride. He had seen her determination and her desire to help others, even at such a young age. "I have no doubt, Sophia," he said. "You have a gift for teaching, and you have the kind of heart that can make a real difference in the world." Her face lit up with a smile that melted Ryan's heart. "Thanks, Mr. Weston," she said softly. "I'm going to work really hard." Her words meant more than she could possibly know. Ryan was determined to support her in every way he could. As the months passed, the bond between Ryan, Sophia, and her brother grew even stronger. They celebrated holidays together, built memories that would last a lifetime, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of life that Ryan had once taken for granted. He began to realize that his life had been incomplete until they came into it. They had filled a void he didn't even know existed. And now, he couldn't imagine his life without them. One Saturday afternoon, Ryan took the kids to the park for a picnic. The sun was shining, and the air was crisp with the promise of a new season. As they sat together, laughing and enjoying the moment, Ryan felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time in his life, he felt truly content. Sophia and her brother were not just his responsibility, they were his family. The thought of losing them was unthinkable. As they packed up to leave, Ryan's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw that it was his lawyer. A feeling of unease washed over him as he answered the call. "Mr. Weston, I have some news regarding the custody case," the lawyer said. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, he feared the worst. "What is it?" he asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "The judge has ruled in favor of permanent custody," the lawyer said, a note of relief in his voice. "Sophia and her brother are officially yours." Ryan felt a wave of emotion wash over him. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at Sophia and her brother, who were playing nearby. He walked over to them, his heart full of love and gratitude. "It's official," Ryan said, his voice choked with emotion. "You're both mine, forever." Sophia looked up at him with wide eyes, her face breaking into a grin. "Really?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Really?" Ryan said, kneeling down to her level. "You're home, and you always will be." In that moment, Ryan realized that this was the moment he had been waiting for his entire life. He had found what he had been searching for, what he had been missing all along. It wasn't wealth or success. It was family. The love and bond he shared with Sophia and her brother was more valuable than anything he had ever achieved. As they embraced, Ryan felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never known before. This was what true happiness felt like, surrounded by the people who mattered most. As they drove home together that evening, the city lights sparkling in the distance, Ryan knew that this was just the beginning of their journey together. There was still so much to experience, so much to build. But for the first time, he knew he wasn't alone. He had a family, and together, they would face whatever came next. As the weeks turned into months, Ryan found that life with Sophia and her brother was becoming more than just about survival. It was about rebuilding, healing, and moving forward together. Ryan had always prided himself on his ability to solve problems, to turn difficult situations into success stories, but nothing had prepared him for the emotional journey of fatherhood. Watching Sophia flourish in school and her brother develop his talents for painting was a reminder of how far they had all come. They had gone from a place of abandonment and fear to one of love, hope, and endless possibilities. Despite their progress, life still had its challenges. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Ryan could sense a change in the atmosphere. Sophia, who had been so full of life lately, seemed quiet, distant. Her brother was busy chatting about his new art project, but Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Sophia, is everything okay?" Ryan asked gently, setting his fork down. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "I'm fine, Mr. Weston," she replied, but her voice lacked the usual confidence. Ryan didn't press the issue immediately. He wanted to give her the space to open up when she was ready. Over the next few days, he noticed the same quietness in her. She was withdrawing, becoming more reserved. It was a sharp contrast to the happy, outgoing girl who had joined his family not long ago. One afternoon, after school, Ryan sat down with Sophia. "Sophia, I know something's been bothering you. You can tell me anything, sweetheart," he said, his voice filled with concern. Sophia looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What are you scared of?" Ryan asked, his heart heavy. "I don't want to go back to the way things were. What if something happens and you can't protect us anymore?" The words hit Ryan harder than he expected. He had never thought that Sophia might still be haunted by the past. To her, the fear of abandonment, of losing the safety they had found, was a constant presence. "Sophia," Ryan said softly, "I promise you, I'm never going to let anything happen to you. You are my family now, and I will always protect you. No one will ever hurt you again, not as long as I'm here." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and she threw her arms around him, clinging to him tightly. Ryan hugged her back, holding her close, not knowing how to make the fear go away, but knowing he would try his hardest to ease it. The next few weeks were filled with moments of growth, but also moments of vulnerability. Ryan worked to ensure that Sophia and her brother never felt the threat of their past ever again. He enrolled them in a new therapy program to help them process the trauma they had endured, and he made sure they always had someone to talk to if they needed it. Slowly, Sophia began to open up more. The therapy sessions helped, and with each passing day, she grew stronger. She was still that bright, ambitious girl with dreams of becoming a teacher, but now, she was also more aware of her own strength. She knew that the road to healing would take time, but with Ryan by her side, she was no longer afraid. One evening, after a particularly tough session, Sophia came to Ryan and said something that made his heart swell with pride. "Mr. Weston, I think I'm ready to help others," she said. "I want to be a teacher more than ever." Ryan smiled, his eyes glistening with tears. "And you will be, Sophia. You'll be the best teacher, because you've already taught me so much about love, resilience, and the importance of family." That moment was a turning point for Ryan. He had always seen the world in terms of achievements and success, but now he saw it through the lens of love, healing, and growth. As he looked at Sophia and her brother, he realized just how much they had all changed. They had found something deeper than family. They had found healing. Together, they had turned pain into strength, fear into courage, and isolation into belonging. And for the first time in his life, Ryan felt truly complete. As the months passed, Ryan continued to watch Sophia and her brother grow, both emotionally and academically. They were beginning to look at their future with hope and determination, something that had been foreign to them just a short time ago. But while the wounds from their past were healing, the scars would remain forever, and Ryan knew they still had a long road ahead. One afternoon, as the weather began to warm with the arrival of spring, Ryan took the kids to the local park for a day of relaxation. The sunlight streamed through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground as Sophia and her brother ran ahead, laughing, full of life. Ryan smiled as he watched them play. It was moments like this that filled his heart with joy. But as he sat on the bench, watching them, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't the kids. They were fine. It was him. Ryan realized he had been so focused on helping Sophia and her brother, on making sure they had everything they needed, that he had neglected his own well-being. He hadn't taken time for himself, and in doing so, he had started to lose touch with who he really was. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Ryan sat alone in his office, staring at the city skyline. He thought about his life before he had met Sophia and her brother. He had been driven by ambition, by the desire to build an empire. But now his focus had shifted. He had a family to care for, and that was more important than any business deal or corporate achievement. Ryan knew he needed to find balance, not just for himself, but for the children he had promised to protect. The next day, he made a decision. He scheduled time to spend with Sophia and her brother, not as their guardian, but as their father. He decided to take a break from work and focus on the things that truly mattered, his family. They went on trips to explore new places, visited museums, and even took weekend getaways to the beach. It was during one of these trips that Ryan realized something incredible. He had always thought that success came from accomplishments, from building something that would last. But what he had built with Sophia and her brother was something far more valuable: love, trust, and a sense of belonging. One afternoon, as they sat on the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore, Sophia turned to Ryan. "Mr. Weston," she said, her voice soft but filled with emotion, "I've been thinking about what you said the other day. About being a teacher." Ryan looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. "And what did you decide?" he asked. "I want to be a teacher," she said with a quiet determination. "But not just any teacher. I want to help kids like me, who've been through hard times. I want to give them hope." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. He had always known Sophia had the potential to be a great teacher, but hearing her say those words, knowing how much she had overcome, filled him with an overwhelming sense of pride. "Sophia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are going to be an incredible teacher, and I will do everything I can to help you make that dream come true." As the days passed, Ryan's commitment to his family grew stronger. He took steps to balance his work and personal life, making sure he was there for Sophia and her brother in every way possible. He continued to provide for them, but now he knew that the most important thing he could give them was his time, his love, and his support. One evening, as they sat down for dinner together, Sophia and her brother smiled at him. "You're the best dad, Mr. Weston," Sophia said, her voice full of gratitude. "You've given us everything we ever wanted." Ryan looked at her, his heart full. He had spent so many years chasing success, but now he knew that the real success was right in front of him. It was the love he shared with Sophia and her brother, the family they had become, and the future they were building together. In that moment, Ryan realized that he had found the true meaning of life, not in wealth or status, but in the bonds of family and love. And he was more than willing to do whatever it took to nurture those bonds for the rest of his life. As the seasons changed, so did the lives of Ryan, Sophia, and her brother. The growth they had experienced as a family was undeniable. The struggles of the past seemed like distant memories, and now, as they sat together in their new home, there was a sense of peace that Ryan had never known. Every day was filled with laughter, learning, and the simple joys of family life. But even as they embraced their new life, Ryan could sense that Sophia, though stronger, still carried a weight from her past. She had become a confident, driven young girl, but her fear of losing everything still lingered in her eyes sometimes. Ryan had done everything he could to provide for her and her brother, but he knew that true healing would take time. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sophia asked a question that Ryan had been dreading. "Mr. Weston," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you ever think about what would happen if something happened to you?" Ryan turned to her, his heart sinking. He had always promised to protect her and her brother, to be their pillar of strength, but he realized he had never truly confronted the fear of what might happen if he couldn't keep that promise. "I think about it, Sophia," he said softly, his voice filled with the weight of the truth. "But I want you to know something. No matter what happens, I will always be here with you in spirit. You and your brother are my family, and nothing will ever change that." Sophia looked at him, her eyes filled with both sorrow and gratitude. She had been carrying that fear with her for so long, but hearing Ryan speak those words gave her a sense of comfort she hadn't realized she needed. "I don't want to lose you," she said quietly. Ryan's heart broke at her words, but he knew that what she needed most was reassurance. "You won't," he said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few weeks, Ryan began to take steps to ensure that if anything ever did happen to him, Sophia and her brother would be cared for. He worked with his lawyer to set up a will, naming a guardian who could continue to provide for them and keep them safe. It was a hard conversation to have, but it was necessary. Sophia and her brother needed to know that even in his absence, they would never be alone. As Ryan signed the final document, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had done everything he could to secure their future. He could finally rest easy, knowing that their lives would be filled with love and security, no matter what. It was around this time that Ryan began to realize that his role in their lives had evolved. He was no longer just their protector. He was their father, their guide, and their greatest supporter. And in return, Sophia and her brother had taught him lessons he would carry for the rest of his life. They had shown him what true success was: love, family, and the courage to overcome anything life throws your way. One afternoon, as Ryan walked through the park with Sophia and her brother, He was struck by how far they had all come. The world that had once been filled with fear, uncertainty, and loneliness now felt full of hope, laughter, and endless possibilities. He had given them a home, but they had given him something far more precious, a sense of belonging. As they sat on a bench together, watching the children play, Ryan realized that he had found everything he had ever wanted. His success in life had always been defined by his business achievements, his wealth, and his career. But now, his definition of success had changed. The true wealth in his life was not in money or status, but in the love and bond he shared with Sophia and her brother. And as they smiled at him, as they laughed together, he knew that this was the family he had always needed, the family he had always longed for. In that moment, Ryan felt a profound sense of gratitude. His life was no longer about climbing to the top or proving his worth. It was about cherishing the moments with the people he loved most. And that was a success far beyond anything he had ever imagined. As the year drew to a close, Ryan reflected on the journey he had taken with Sophia and her brother. The holidays were approaching, and the family was preparing for their first Christmas together. It was a time of joy and celebration, but also a time to reflect on how far they had come. Ryan had never truly celebrated Christmas before. Growing up, it had always been another day on the calendar, marked by obligatory family dinners and the absence of any real warmth. But this year was different. This year, he had found something far more meaningful than any gift or accolade. He had found family. He had found love. He had found home. Sophia and her brother had transformed his life, just as much as he had transformed theirs. They had healed him in ways he never expected. They had taught him what it meant to truly care for someone, to put others' needs before your own. And in doing so, they had shown him the true meaning of life. As Christmas Eve approached, Ryan made plans to decorate the house. Sophia was excited about the tree, and her brother was more than happy to help with the decorations. They worked together, laughing and chatting as they hung ornaments and strung lights. Ryan watched them, a smile tugging at his lips. The house felt alive with warmth, a stark contrast to the cold, empty mansion he had once lived in. Later that evening, after the tree was decorated and the house was filled with the smell of fresh-baked cookies, Sophia handed Ryan a small, wrapped gift. It was nothing extravagant, but the gesture meant the world to him. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Weston," she said with a shy smile. Ryan's heart swelled as he opened the gift to find a framed picture of the three of them, Sophia, her brother, and himself. It was a simple photo, but it captured everything that mattered: love, connection, and the family they had become. "Thank you, Sophia," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is the best gift I've ever received." Later, as they sat down to their first Christmas dinner together, Ryan felt a profound sense of gratitude. The table was full of food, but more importantly, it was full of laughter and love. They were no longer just survivors of their past. They were a family, and as they shared stories, laughed, and enjoyed the meal together, Ryan realized that he had everything he needed right there with him. After dinner, they all gathered in the living room to open presents. Sophia and her brother were both delighted with their gifts, but it was the joy in their eyes, the sparkle in their smiles, that truly made this Christmas special. It wasn't about the material things, it was about the moments they shared, the bond they had formed, and the love that had blossomed between them. That night, as they all settled into bed, Ryan took a moment to reflect on the year that had passed. He thought about the man he had been before, the man who had lived only for success, and the man he had become. He thought about the future, about the opportunities that awaited Sophia and her brother, and about the life they would build together. He had given them everything he could: his time, his love, his protection, but in return, they had given him something far greater: a purpose. The love they shared was the most precious gift he could ever receive, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly content. He wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't searching for something more. He had everything he needed right there, with his family. As he lay in bed that night, surrounded by the warmth and comfort of the life they had built, Ryan smiled to himself. This was his true legacy, not the businesses he had built, not the wealth he had accumulated, but the love he had given, the family he had created. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that this was just the beginning of the beautiful journey they would take together. As the new year began, Ryan felt a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. He had always been a man driven by ambition, constantly seeking the next challenge, the next success. But now, as he watched Sophia and her brother grow, he realized that the true meaning of life wasn't in the accolades or the achievements. It was in the quiet moments of connection, love, and family. The bond they had formed together was something he could never have imagined before. He had spent so many years focused on his career, on building his empire, but now he knew that the real empire he had built was the one in his home, with Sophia and her brother. One evening, after dinner, as they sat together in the living room, Sophia spoke up. "Mr. Weston," she said, her voice filled with uncertainty. "Do you ever think about what's next for us?" Ryan turned to her, sensing the weight in her words. He had always tried to shield her from the worries of the future, but he knew she was growing older, and with that came the inevitable questions about what lay ahead. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Like, when we grow up," she said, glancing at her brother, who was drawing quietly in the corner. "What happens when we're older? Will we still be together?" Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. He had always promised to be there for her, but hearing her express that fear of losing their family, reminded him of how fragile their happiness could be. "Sophia," he said softly, "I want you to know that no matter what happens in the future, you and your brother will always be my family. We will always be together. I will never let anything separate us." She smiled at him, her eyes filled with trust. "I know, Mr. Weston. I just worry sometimes." Ryan reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "I know, sweetheart, but you don't have to worry. We're a family now, and that means we'll face everything together." Over the next few weeks, Ryan took steps to ensure that their future was secure, both emotionally and financially. He had already made arrangements for their education, their care, and even their future careers. But it was more than just practical matters. It was about providing them with the tools they needed to thrive in the world, while still holding on to the love and safety of their family. As Sophia continued to excel in school, she began to take more responsibility in her life. She was no longer the timid, fearful girl she had been when Ryan first met her. She was strong, confident, and determined to make something of herself. Her brother, too, was growing, developing his talents and becoming more comfortable in his own skin. One afternoon, Ryan took them both to a community center where they were volunteering. He wanted them to experience the joy of giving back, of helping others, and seeing how their own lives could inspire those around them. As they spent the afternoon painting walls and organizing supplies, Ryan watched Sophia and her brother interact with the other volunteers. It was a reminder of how far they had come. They had gone from being lost and abandoned to being the ones who could help others, the ones who could offer kindness and support. That evening, as they drove home, Ryan looked at the two of them in the back seat, laughing and joking together. He knew that they were ready for the world, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as he thought about all that they had been through, he realized that the greatest gift he could give them was not just the security of a home, but the freedom to be themselves, to chase their dreams, and to never be afraid of what the future might hold. It was not just about protecting them from harm. It was about giving them the tools they needed to create their own future. As they arrived home, Ryan felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had come so far from the man he once was. He had found a purpose beyond success, beyond wealth. He had found his family, and with them, he had found everything he had been searching for. As he watched them walk into the house, his heart swelled with love and pride. They had become more than just children in need. They had become his children, his family, and he was determined to make sure they had everything they deserved. And as the door closed behind them, he knew that this was just the beginning of the beautiful journey they would take together. As spring began to turn into summer, Ryan continued to see his family flourish. Sophia, now 13, had grown into a confident young woman, determined to achieve her dreams. Her brother, just a few years younger, was discovering his own path, with a growing talent in painting that impressed even Ryan. They were becoming more than just survivors of their past. They were thriving. The house was filled with laughter and the joy of a family that had found its place, and Ryan couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pride in the children he had come to love as his own. Still, the journey was not without its challenges. As Sophia grew older, Ryan began to notice a subtle shift in her. She had always been a bright, hard-working student, But now there were moments when she seemed withdrawn, distant. Ryan wasn't sure what to make of it at first. She had always been open about her feelings, so why was she suddenly pulling away? One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Ryan decided to address his concern. "Sophia," he began gently, "I've noticed you've been a little quieter lately. Is everything okay?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know, Mr. Weston," she said softly. "It's just, sometimes I feel like I'm not enough. Like maybe I'm not living up to what you expect of me." Ryan's heart ached as he heard the words. He had never once expected perfection from Sophia. He had never placed any pressure on her other than to be herself, to follow her heart and chase her dreams. But here she was, worried that she wasn't living up to some standard that only she had set. "Sophia," he said, his voice filled with warmth and reassurance. "You don't have to be perfect. You are enough, just as you are. You've already accomplished so much, and I'm proud of you every single day. But more than that, I'm proud of the person you are. I don't expect anything from you other than for you to be happy and to follow your heart." She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "But what if I mess up?" she whispered. "What if I let you down?" Ryan smiled softly and took her hand. "You can never let me down, Sophia. You're my family. You've already given me more than I could ever ask for. Whatever happens, I will always be here for you. And I will always love you." The words seemed to sink in, and for the first time in days, a smile tugged at the corners of Sophia's lips. "Thank you, Mr. Weston," she said quietly, her voice full of gratitude. "I needed to hear that." In that moment, Ryan realized just how important his role in her life was. It wasn't just about providing for her and her brother. It was about being the emotional anchor they both needed. He had promised to protect them, to love them, and he had come to understand that this promise wasn't just about physical safety. It was about helping them navigate the complexities of life, offering guidance, and being a source of unconditional love and support. Over the next few weeks, Ryan made sure to spend more quality time with Sophia and her brother. He took them to new places, explored their interests, and encouraged them to be open about their fears and dreams. Slowly, Sophia began to blossom again, her confidence returning as she realized she was loved for who she was, not for what she could achieve. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Sophia spoke up, her voice filled with a new sense of determination. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do when I'm older," she said, looking directly at Ryan. "I want to help kids who've been through what I've been through. I want to be a teacher, not just to teach, but to show them that they're not alone." Ryan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I think that's an amazing dream, Sophia, and I know you'll make it come true." It was in that moment that Ryan realized that his role as a father figure wasn't just about taking care of them. It was about empowering them to become the best versions of themselves. He had given them a home, but in return, they had given him a purpose, a deeper understanding of life and love. As he looked at Sophia, who was now smiling with hope, and her brother, who had found his own joy in painting, Ryan knew that this family was the greatest gift he could ever have received. They had been through so much, but together, they had created a future full of promise and love. And that was all he ever needed. As the years passed, the bond between Ryan, Sophia, and her brother grew stronger, and the life they had built together was a testament to resilience, love, and the power of second chances. They had come a long way since the day Ryan had found Sophia and her brother on the cold streets, abandoned and in desperate need of help. Now, as they stood on the threshold of a new chapter, Ryan couldn't help but reflect on how far they had all come. Sophia, now 15, was thriving in school and pursuing her dreams with the same determination that had always defined her. Her brother, now a talented young artist, had found his passion and was beginning to showcase his work in local galleries. Their lives were filled with hope, opportunity, and the love that had once been so elusive. Ryan had been a part of their journey from the very beginning, and he had seen them transform into confident, strong individuals. But more than that, he had transformed as well. He had gone from a man consumed by ambition and success to a man who understood that true happiness was found in the people you love and the relationships you build. One day, as they sat together in the living room, Ryan looked at Sophia and her brother, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "You know," he said, his voice full of emotion, "when I first met you two, I never imagined the incredible people you would become. I'm so proud of you both. You've come so far, and you've done it together." Sophia smiled and reached for his hand. "We couldn't have done it without you, Mr. Weston," she said softly. "You gave us everything we needed to be who we are today." Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. It was hard to put into words how much they meant to him. He had started this journey thinking he was saving them, but in the end, it was they who had saved him. They had given him purpose, love, and a sense of belonging he had never known. As time went on, Ryan knew his role in their lives was evolving. He had always been their protector, but now he saw himself more as their guide, their mentor, and their unwavering support. They were no longer children in need. They were young adults ready to take on the world. And he would always be there for them, cheering them on, just as he had since that fateful day they crossed his path. One day, as the family sat down to celebrate Sophia's graduation from high school, Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet pride. This was a milestone he had never anticipated, and yet, here they were. Sophia had accomplished so much, and her future was bright with promise. Her brother, too, was finding success as an artist, with opportunities opening up that he had never dreamed possible. "This is just the beginning," Ryan said, raising a glass to Sophia and her brother. "You both have so much ahead of you. I'm excited to see where your lives will take you." And as he looked at them, surrounded by love and support, Ryan knew that they had made it through the hardest parts of their lives. They had faced unimaginable challenges, but they had come out stronger on the other side. They had found a family in each other, and that was more than Ryan had ever hoped for. As the years continued to unfold, Ryan remained by their side, always there for them, guiding them through the ups and downs of life. He had given them a home, a future, and most importantly, the love they had always deserved. And in return, they had given him something even more precious, his purpose. Together, they had created a family, a bond that would never be broken. Ryan smiled, looking at the future with hope, knowing that he had found everything he had ever wanted: love, family, and the joy of seeing the people he cared about succeed. He had fulfilled his promise to them, and in doing so, he had found a deeper meaning in his own life. Discover a deeply emotional journey in these touching stories that will captivate your heart. Follow the incredible transformation of a millionaire CEO who unexpectedly finds himself saving two abandoned children, offering them not just shelter, but the love and guidance they desperately need. These touching stories reveal the true power of family, love, and second chances as they navigate the complex path to healing. As the family grows stronger, each moment is filled with hope, challenges, and triumphs, showing that the smallest gestures of kindness can change lives forever. These touching stories will remind you of the profound impact that love and support can have on a person's life. Witness how a life once consumed by success is redefined by the simple, yet powerful gift of family, and experience the journey of redemption, healing, and unconditional love. In the end, these touching stories prove that the most meaningful achievements aren't found in wealth or status, but in the relationships we build and the love we give. Through hardship and pain, they rise together, finding strength in each other and creating a future filled with promise. These touching stories are a testament to the power of family, showing that no matter where you start, with love and support, you can find a way to overcome anything.